We're starting a brand new series with you today entitled Reset, and that's kind of where we're going to start. We talk about resetting. We're starting all new and fresh in our lives. Sometimes we get to that place in our life where we need to start new and start fresh. Maybe you've landed in Williston. You're starting new and you're starting fresh. If you're watching at home or watching online, we're glad that you're here. We're speaking to you as well. We want you to know that we're starting fresh there as well. Go ahead, Hannah. You can put my first slide up this morning. It'd be great. When it comes to just starting fresh and new, we all get places in our lives where we make mistakes. Let me take you back in time a little bit and share with you about some mistakes that I made. Let's see if you can relate to this. Do you identify with this at all? Do you remember this? Ms. Pac-Man. If you remember this, how many remember Ms. Pac-Man? We could almost sing the song together, couldn't we? You put the quarter in there, and it kind of makes a woot woot, and then it's like, okay, anyway, but. And you put the quarter in, and you grab that joystick, and you just start to shove and move that thing all around. And when you play this enough times, you begin to understand that those little ghosts that are chasing you around that screen, there's a pattern. But before you learn the pattern, you get caught. Okay, now next one up, you only got one guy left, and so you're just racing around that thing, and you're trying to get the pattern on that whole thing, and you want to learn the pattern because you want to get to the next level, because the first level, you start to eat cherries for bonus points. Remember that? And then you get the strawberries, we get bananas and peaches. If you remember that, you're as old as I am. How many care, right? All right, this is awesome. So you're trying to get this whole thing done, and then you lose your third guy, and you still haven't got the pattern done, and you want to get to the next level. So what do you do? You just walk away from the game, right? No, you put another quarter in, right? You listen to the song again, and you start all over. You're trying to learn the pattern. And I don't know how many levels you got up. I don't remember how many levels I got on this thing. How many spent at least $1 on Ms. Pac-Man? Raise your hand. Okay. How many could have put a child through college with what you spent on this Pac-Man? All right, that's honest. And then amazing thing happened. Now, this is like in the early 80s, and then something happened a couple of years later. The Atari 2600 came out. Ooh, I'll tell you what, you hooked up Atari to your 19-inch color television set, if you were fortunate, and you bought Ms. Pac-Man, and you put that cartridge in there, and you started to play Ms. Pac-Man, and you had the joystick on your Atari controller there, and you're playing, and if you started to make mistakes, and you were having problems, what did you do? You just hit the reset button. It's like 0-0, new game. You started out all brand new and fresh. You could start out and you didn't have to pay a quarter. You had like limitless lives, didn't you? And you start making mistakes, reset. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great with the mistakes you have made in your life if you could just hit a reset button and start all over again? Would that be awesome? It would be great if we hit a reset button, because all of us have made some mistakes in our life. And the incredible thing is this, that we tend to learn really quickly about things in life that have the least amount of impact in our lives. And the things that have the greater amount of impact, it seems like it takes us longer to learn lessons. For instance, maybe you got this email, and when you were just kind of learning email, you were supposed to click reply because you just wanted to reply to the one person sending it, but you clicked reply all, and suddenly you realized as soon as you hit send that you had an email went to people that shouldn't have probably seen that email. We learned about how to play games. We learned from playing the game over and over again how to play the game better. We learned about driving. We learned better skills about driving. Maybe if you're like me, you're trying to learn Twitter and tweeting. That's not even a masculine vocabulary. Like, you guys don't walk, hey Bill, do you tweet? I mean, it's just a bizarre world. So we're trying to learn this thing about Twitter, and we can kind of learn Twitter regardless what age we are. I'm still learning. Sarah, I didn't put any handle up here. There's no hashtags, nothing, because I'm a tweeter loser. All right, so anyway, but when it comes to the bigger things in life, sometimes we don't learn so quickly. Like with marriage, relationships, and money, and jobs, and all those kinds of things. Because you know what we do? We tend to repeat them over and over and over again. And then when we get into a financial situation or a marital difficulty, and we have a story to tell. Well, you know what, I didn't know that she had all this drama coming into the marriage. I didn't know she had all this baggage. Well, nobody told me about his drinking problem or the job situation. The guy's a jerk. Who could work for a guy like that? The teacher had it in for me. I mean, from the first day of classes, she had it in for me. There was no way I was going to pull a good grade in that classroom. And we tell that story, and we tell the story so many times, we believe that story to be our story. It's a true story. And then when it comes to admitting, maybe, did you have you always have a sensible, reasonable parent or an adult in your life. Well, do you think maybe you had a little part in that marital thing or the financial? No. I mean, just be honest. If you have drama in your life and there's problems in your life, let's just be honest. It's not your fault, is it? And so we tend to be really resistant to admitting our mistakes. And kind of the big idea this morning, the big idea that I want you to get is this, that if we don't want our future to look like our past, we have to admit our mistakes. We've got to, at some point in our life, say, I had a part in this. I admit that I made a mistake. I was, say it with me, it's the R word, wrong. Okay, all right. Just want to see if you're awake this morning, all right? Here's what we're going to do this morning before we're all done today, before we're done today. We call this in church world, these steps up in the front up here in church world, we call this an altar. You can call them steps. And I think it's great because altar, while it's spelled one way, when we come to the altar, our life gets altered. Or you can come to the steps and start stepping towards God. And this morning, before we're all done, I want you to make a move towards this place to start admitting some mistakes and take some responsibility and ownership for things that maybe you've done in your past that have followed you. Because let's just be honest, you're maybe on your second marriage. Maybe you're on your third or even your fourth marriage. And for some of you in the third and fourth marriage, you start looking at the marriage you're in right now, and man, it looks a lot like the last one. Maybe you're in a financial difficulty right now. You filed for bankruptcy, like that chapter, it's all gone. It's done. You're not a part of that anymore. And so you've moved to Williston. You're making more money than you've ever made in your life. And as you start to order and reorder your finances, suddenly you're making decisions. You're getting yourself into debt. And when you really take an honest assessment of your life, boy, it's looking an awful lot like things looked before. You're in a relationship right now. You're dating somebody. You're dating him. You're dating her. And why is it that God just cannot put good, godly men or women on this earth? Why are they all losers? And you start looking at all the failed relationships in your past. Listen to me. There's serial daters in here, and you know who you are. I'm not talking about dating Captain Crunch or Snap, Crackle, and Pop. You're serial daters. I mean, it's just like from one to the next to the next to the next. And all of these relationships starts to look the same after a while. Let me ask you this. What do they all have in common? Answer, you. Yeah. Okay, so how do we get this way? Where did we learn that really it's never my problem? I'm not the one to blame. It's their fault. Where did we learn that? Well, we learned it from a couple of people that we're going to read about in the Bible in just a little bit. It's something that all of us have inside of us. There's something inside of us that says, you know what? I don't want to take responsibility for this. This was somebody else's fault. This is their problem. And I'm telling you, if you want a better future, I don't know where your life is right now, but if you want a better future, you have to own the piece of your past before you have a piece in the future. We just avoid our problems. If we try to blame others all the time, you cannot blame your way into a better future. Now, the reason that we're so good about blaming is that we learned this. We just learned it. It's in us, it's in you, and it's in me, and we learned it, and it all had its origin. So if you want to follow along, turn in your Bible to the book of Genesis. Genesis, the very first book in your Bible. Genesis chapter 1. Let me pause right here for a little bit. Genesis chapter 1, we're going to kind of bounce off 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Maybe you went to college and a college professor told you this stuff is all made up. It's just a myth. Don't believe it. It's just allegories and all that kind of thing. Let me just tell you why. Let me just tell you why I believe the Old Testament stories to be true, okay? Because a historical figure named Jesus Christ believed the Old Testament to be true. And Jesus predicted his own death and resurrection, and eyewitnesses saw him die, and eyewitnesses saw him alive after his death. And I think anybody who can predict his death and resurrection is pretty credible. And if he believes in the New Testament or the Old Testament, I believe in it too, okay? So that's where we're going to go today, back to the book of Genesis. We're going to find out where did this blame game thing come into all of us. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse number 27, we're just going to give you a little historical background before we get into this. God created mankind, that would be you and me, in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So much packed into that one verse. Verse number 28. God blessed them, talking about Adam and Eve, and he said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. In other words, go have children. And then when you're done having children, fill the earth and subdue it. In other words, all you need to do at this point is just have babies and be good stewards of my creation. That's it. Pretty good on the responsibility scale there so far, aren't we? Skipping over to Genesis chapter 2, verse number 16. God commanded the man, he's talking to Adam now, he says to Adam, look, here's what I want you to understand, Adam. Everything's created. You got a home, you got a family, this is where it all is. You can eat from any tree in the garden. Any tree. Look at all the trees, Adam. See all the trees? You can eat from any of those. Goes on to say, verse number 17, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because when you eat from it, you'll die. Okay, wait, Pastor, wasn't there like 10 commandments in the Bible? Like 10 commandments didn't come for a long, long time later. One commandment. One command. Adam, see that tree over there? Yep. Don't eat it. Don't eat anything that comes off that. Just don't eat it. Like that's it? Yeah, one command. Do you think you guys could do really well with one command? Just one rule. There's only one rule, and we're just going to establish this one rule because there's got to be a boss in this whole organization, and God says, look, I'm the boss. You're Adam and you're Eve, and here's the rule. There's just one rule. Don't eat from that tree. Got it? And Adam and Eve did like you and me did when we were kids, and mom and dad said, stay off or get on or don't eat or, whatever the whole case is. We got as close to it as we possibly could, and we kind of looked through the corner of our eye, didn't we, to see if they would see us doing what they told us not to do, right? Adam and Eve. Where do you think that came from? It came from Adam and Eve. That's exactly where it came from. One rule, one rule. And if we just had one rule, we'd disobey it too. And here's the fact and here's the reality. When you read the story, we're going to get into this a little bit. Adam and Eve, they didn't listen. They broke the one command. And when they broke the commandment, they sinned. And as a result of their sin, we are born into sin. We're all born into sin. If you don't believe in sin, go up to our nursery. Take away all the toys and put one out there for all 12 children to play with. I'm telling you, there's sin. In fact, you say, if it's a little offensive to you and say, I don't really believe in sin, Pastor, look, God had rules, you have rules, you don't even keep your own rules, do you? You put stuff in your mouth you said you'd never put in your mouth, like broccoli, okay? I mean, you don't drive the way you're supposed to drive. You break your own rules. You look at humanity, you can go watch the news. You know that humanity has a problem with rules. Where did it come from? Well, I think it came from what we're reading about this morning. Now, Genesis chapter 3, verse number 6. This is where we're going to jump to now. This is good. This is where it all kind of went downhill. This is the details of the sin. When the woman saw that fruit on that tree, she's looking at that tree. It was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom. Stop right there. I don't think Adam and Eve just got up on Thursday morning and decided, you know what, Adam, what do you say we walk out into the garden today and let's eat some of that fruit from that tree? You think that's a good idea? Yeah, I'm all about that. Let's go do that. I don't think that's the way it started. Adam, you want a cup of coffee? Sure, let's have some coffee. And donuts. I'm telling you, it's a great place to live, right? And probably watched a little TV. Adam went out and mowed the lawn, and Eve, she went out in the rose bushes and trimmed the bushes, and probably came back and had some more coffee and a cookie. Somewhere along the line, they got too close to the line. In fact, whatever sin you have committed, whatever thing that you feel the most shame for, whatever the greatest regret is in your life, I'll bet you, if I would have told you at the beginning of that day, if God would have said at the beginning of that day, guess what you're going to do today? No. I would never do that. God knows us better than we know ourselves. And Eve looks at the tree. She sees the fruit, that it's a beautiful fruit. It's pleasing to the eye. It would be desirable for having something that it seems like God is withholding from us, this wisdom. Slow-mo, and the music changes. She reaches up and grabs the forbidden fruit. I don't know what it was. Couldn't have been an apple. Apples are good. She grabs the apple, slow-mo and down, and you're watching the movie going, because you know it's going to happen, don't you? And she eats some of it, and then she gave some of it to her husband. Look, Eve gets really a bad rap in this whole story. Guys, he was standing right next to her the whole time, watching the whole thing, all right? He was with her, and he ate it too. So guys, don't be going, yeah, what a woman, you know, what's all that. He was right there. He could have slapped her hand. What are you thinking, woman? You know. Verse number 7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. In an instant, they knew that they had done something wrong. In an instant, they felt shame. In an instant, they felt vulnerable. And to cover themselves up in that vulnerability, they tried sewing fig leaves together to make coverings for themselves. Now, I don't know a whole lot about botany, but I've grown up around plants a lot my whole life, and I'm just thinking, I don't care if the fig leaves are this big or if the fig leaves are this big. And you sew them together, as soon as you pull that fig leaf off the tree, it's not getting any more nourishment or moisture from the tree, and whatever size that leaf is, it starts to shrivel. We got to get some more fig leaves, Adam, you know. This was a size 12. It looks like an 8. I don't know, you know. And so they got to go get more coverings. And here's the great thing about this story. As soon as they felt this vulnerability before God, they wanted to cover it. And man's attempt to cover his guilt is short-term at best. Man's attempt to fix his own problems is short-term at best. It just doesn't work. Verse number 8. Well, then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. I think this is routine. At the end of each day, God comes in fellowship with his creation. He's made Adam and Eve. He desired this communion between himself and his creation, that at the end of the day, he would come and converse with them about the events of the day. How his heart would leap at getting together with his prized creation, Adam and Eve, and there's nothing that stands between. I can go to them in the garden. They can stand. There is no shame. There's no guilt. There's just nothing. And there's absolute openness and vulnerability with me, covering nothing. But this day, when God gets to the garden, quiet. Adam and Eve are not where Adam and Eve usually were, because they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Verse 9 says, so God called to the man, where are you? He knew. You know what I love about this part of the story right here? And maybe this message is just for you. When Adam and Eve messed up, and this was a big mess up. This is the mess up that would affect every generation that would follow behind, whereby because of that mess up, God would have to send his one and only Son, Jesus Christ, to die a horrible death, taking upon himself the penalty that was due you and me. That's how bad the mess up was. And if he messed up that bad, still in the middle of that, God went looking for him. I don't know where you are today. I don't know how bad you feel like you have messed up or will mess up. But when we mess up, it's great to know God comes looking for us. He doesn't just walk on by. He doesn't turn his back. He doesn't ignore us. He doesn't say, well, we might as well give up on that one. God came looking for Adam, and he comes looking for us. Verse number 10, Adam says, well, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid. For the first time, the emotion of fear is felt because Adam has something to hide. How do I deal with this? And so he tries to hide from God. We all hide. When we do something wrong, we all hide, don't we? Nobody comes right out and says, hey, guess what sin I've been committing lately? We just hide, you know, and it's just in us. It's born in us. I know it's born in us because it was born in me. Let me tell you a story. I've heard this story before, and you've heard this story before, and you'll know I've been at this church a long time when you can tell my stories for me, right? Okay. I think I was 3. And back in the 60s, and I haven't seen it since, back in the 60s, there was this air freshener, and I think you could get blue or green. And it came in a bottle that looked almost like Scope. I'm kidding you not. And it had this wick inside of it, and you'd pull the wick up, and it would just stick out of the bottle, and then it made the air smell wonderful. Thank you. And my babysitter had one of these in the corner in the bathroom behind the stool, and curiosity got the best of me that day. And so I reached over, and I was fiddling with it or something, and I tipped it over, and out runs the blue liquid all over the floor. So you know what I did in that moment? I said, babysitter, her name was Leona, do you have a mop and a rag? I made a mess in here I need to clean. No. I ran from the bathroom, through the bedroom, through the living room, and into their boys' bedroom, and I stood like this against the wall. She'll never find me here. She found me. Okay. But when we sin, we try to hide. We try to hide these things. And then the story gets just incredible because, in fact, they got caught. And whenever we've been caught, isn't it true that whenever we're caught, what do we say? When we're caught, we say, I'm sorry. Now, here's the incredible thing. We do this as parents all the time. This only applies to our children, not to us, because we say, look, you weren't sorry. You're just sorry that you got caught. We tell that to our children all the time, but it only applies to children. It never applies to a grown-up, correct? Am I correct on that? When we get caught, we're not, like, there's no remorse. You know, sin is just kind of fun for a while, isn't it? We got caught. You're not sorry that you were sinning. You're sorry that you got caught. Let's just be honest. And that's exactly the situation with Adam and Eve here. And God says to him in verse number 11, God says this, well, who told you that you were naked? He knew the answer to that. He says, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? He knew the answer. Verse number 12 says this, then the man said, yes, I did eat from the tree, and I take full responsibility. Leave Eve out of it. She's innocent. So you're going, why are people laughing? Well, it's because they heard this story in Sunday school, and they know that I slipped a verse in here that doesn't really exist in the Bible. No, look what he says in verse number 12. This is great. The man said, the woman you put here. You put her here with me. She gave me some of the fruit from the tree, and then I ate it. So, in essence, here's what Adam is saying. Look, yeah, I ate some. I'll admit I had some of the fruit. But look, why don't you created Eve like you? Why don't you and Eve just go take a walk in the garden somewhere, work this whole thing out, figure it all out, and then when you're done, come back and apologize to me for sticking her here in the garden, right? I mean, you guys get it worked out and come back and just tell me what you came up with for an answer in that whole thing. And the first thing they did after they got caught was they learned how to blame. No. Look, I ate some of it, but it's really not my fault. Well, yes, it is partially my fault. It's partially my fault. I mean, I have to admit, I had some. I guess you can still see it there on my list. I ate some of the fruit, but it's not completely my fault. And isn't it true with you, and isn't it true with me, that when we're caught doing something that we didn't want to be doing, when we get into the marital difficulty, we're on the second marriage, the third marriage, when we filed for bankruptcy, when it's a vocational problem, a professional problem, it's a problem in a relationship, problem with the teacher, it's a problem with the boss. Isn't it true for you, and isn't it true for me, that we want to blame somebody else for the drama and all the problems that are taking place? We don't want to take responsibility. I mean, it might be a little bit our fault, but we tell the story and we retell the story so many times that we put our slant on it that we always come out looking like the hero. I mean, I tried for this marriage. I worked hard for this marriage, but no, they didn't want to make a go of it. I tried to work with that teacher, but they're just a jerk. I gave everything to the boss. I put in all these hours. We tell the story over and over until it's believable. It's just not the whole truth. It's mostly the truth, but it's just not the whole truth. Well, then God has a conversation with Eve. Verse 13. Well, the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? God knew the answer to that too. And the woman, well, the serpent deceived me, and I ate it. So God, here's what I think you should do. You and the serpent just go take a walk in the garden, get this whole good versus evil drama all figured out, and when you kind of figure out the score and who's large and in charge, come back and then apologize to me, and I'll forgive you for putting the serpent in the garden. And isn't that the kind of the culture that we live in today? That the culture that we live in looks at famine, they look at disease, they look at war, they look at poverty and all these things and say, you know what? This is God's fault, because if God really loved humanity, if God really loved people, He wouldn't let any of this stuff happen. And humanity does not want to take responsibility for its own actions, but instead blame God for the whole thing. And that's in essence what Eve is doing right here. God, this is like if you hadn't put that stupid snake in the garden, if you hadn't put the tree in the garden, this is really your fault, not mine. Isn't it true for you, and isn't it true for me, that when we get ourselves into this dramatic bind, look what's going on in your life today. You start telling this story, well, we hired this person, or you know what, she brought this into the marriage, or well, I didn't know he had this kind of habit. And isn't it true for you, and isn't it true for me, that it's just hard to admit the truth because it can be so embarrassing. Pretty soon we're going to come to the altars and we're going to talk about just being really honest about our pasts. Because here's what happens. If we always want to be blaming smuggles your past into your future. Blaming just brings it from the back into the front. It's always somebody else's problem, always somebody else's fault. All of your unresolved issues, it's always somebody else's problems. But what you need to do is say, what is my part in all of this? And just be honest. Because until you own your peace from your past, you'll have no peace about your past. Admitting your place of the past, you know what it does? It just drops the tension. And this might be another reason why we don't want to talk about our part. Because you feel this angst inside, you feel this tension, you might feel a little bit anger, you got fired over that job, and that business fell apart, and he backed out on you, and they backed out on their promise, and you got the story to tell, and she didn't come through, and he didn't fulfill the marital vows, and on the story goes. And every time you tell the story, there's this on the inside of you. And when you start to admit the truth and take responsibility for your part, suddenly the anger goes away, and it's not as fun to tell the story anymore, is it? Just saying. I stand up here and just confess my whole life to all of you, and you all sit there looking like wonderful Christian saints. I'm going to give you a homework assignment, and here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. How many did homework a lot in school? Raise your hand. How many got homework but never took a book home? Raise your hand. This is all about confession today, right? Okay, this is good. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home, get a piece of paper, and I want you to draw a circle on it. You're going to get that piece of paper, and that circle is going to represent your drama. That circle is going to represent your sphere of blame. For whatever event has happened in your life, that circle is going to represent your circle of blame. This is where I have blamed. I've blamed, like my parents. I don't know what happened to my parents. They're part of the drug and hippie culture, and I think they did too many lewds. I don't know what it was, and they raised me and got problems there. My boss came out of this whole kind of a culture, and he was a jerk. And then my teacher, I don't have it. My teacher dropped, obviously, at birth. I don't know. And so you got this whole sphere of blame, right? And what I want you to do is go home, and I want you to take a pencil, and I want you to draw a piece in that circle, kind of like a pie piece that would represent your part in all of that blame. Now, let's just be honest. Let's just be totally honest and clear. If you should do this, you're going to get a pen or a pencil in that circle on that paper, and you're going to draw a piece of pie that represents your part in all the problems. And that piece that you're going to draw is going to be about the thickness of a pencil lead, right? That's how big my part is in it. Because let's just be honest. It wasn't my fault, right? Let's just be totally honest. It wasn't my fault. No, you're going to be honest. Well, and I've talked to married people like this. I'll say, well, I've done this very thing with married couples. Make a circle, and I'll give the pen to the guy and say, well, tell me, draw a piece of the pie where you think you're responsible for some of the problems, and it's right down through the middle. Oh, I know it's 50-50 thing. Look, that takes the drama. You don't have a story to tell there. That's just being a coward and backing out of the whole thing. Really be honest and say, how much responsibility do you have in this whole sphere of drama and blame in your life? And if you pray about it and think about it long enough, if you want to, you'll find that maybe you'll be kind of honest. Maybe your piece of the pie gets a little bit bigger. Because if you want to make peace with your past, you have to admit your piece of the past. We don't like to do that so much, do we? And we're afraid to admit. We're afraid to admit because, let's just be honest, it can be really embarrassing to admit those things sometimes because, you know what? You knew, didn't you? He wasn't right for you. You knew she wasn't right for you. Your parents warned you, your mama warned you, your friends warned you. Everybody warned you. And you knew, didn't you? But you're standing that day at the front of the church. You're standing at the front of the church. She's walking down the aisle. It's an exciting day, but there's just something in your heart that says this is not right. The invitations have already been out. The people are there. The cake cutter is there. Photographer's standing in the back. And you just knew, didn't you? But it was too hard to admit it. And so then we went through the whole thing, and it ended up in a divorce, and it really wasn't your fault, was it? But you knew you should have listened. You probably didn't make the phone call because you knew as soon as you made the phone call, you were going to hear what you already knew, so you didn't make the phone call anyway. People warned you, you just didn't listen. Let's just be honest. You're in the relationship today because, let's just be honest, you're lonely. She's not the right one. He's not the right guy, but you're just lonely. Let's just be honest. It was just pure lust. It was just pure lust. That's all it was. Let's just be honest. I was jealous, so I made some rash decisions. I was envious. They started buying stuff that I wanted to buy, and I just tried to justify and went into debt and got into that business deal and got involved with that partner and that whole thing. And you knew it was wrong all the way along, but you went along with it anyway, and now you're suffering the consequences, and now you retell the story. And every time you tell the story, you come out like the rock star, and they come out looking like the jerk. Let's just be honest. You're saying, hey, the teacher had it out for me from day one, and I don't care. You can be 68 years old, and you can still talk about the 8th grade teacher, and the reason I failed geometry class is that teacher was just a jerk, and they had problems, and yada, yada, yada. Let's just be honest. You didn't give the class the effort you should have given. You can still tell the story today with drama and emotion. The boss was a jerk, just a jerk. I mean, the day I walked in, I could tell the guy was a jerk. Nobody could work for the guy. Let's just be honest. You didn't give it your whole effort, did you? Yet you're not at that place anymore. You're not working there anymore. And somebody says, yeah, well, I'm thinking about going to work for so-and-so. Oh, you don't want to go to work there. That guy is like this, and I went to work there, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened. They withheld my paycheck, and I didn't get a room, and yada, yada, yada. And the story goes on and on and on and on. And as you tell the whole story, I mean, the company is just like, it should be in the tank. And they were lucky to have you there whenever you tell the story. Maybe you've moved to Williston, North Dakota, and you left another nation, another country, you left another state, another town, and you left it all behind. And there was all kinds of drama left there. There was a marriage left there. There's broken relationships and stepkids and stepparents and a bad job and a failed marriage, and all of that has gone on. And you moved to Williston, North Dakota, and you're thinking, I'll just come to a new location, and I'll start all over again, and it'll be like it never happened back there. But you've been here long enough now that you're starting to see there's no peace in your future because there's no peace in your past. And there's no peace about your past because you haven't admitted your piece of the past. So in a couple of moments, we're going to come to the front and we're going to pray about those things and just get right and get honest and get real with God and just say, God, yeah, you know what? I was a jerk in the marriage. I was not all that I should have been in that marriage. I didn't give it my all. I checked out a long time ago. Yeah, the teacher might have had their own problems, but I had my own issues too. I had stuff going on at home and in my own life, and I didn't want to own up to it. You say, yeah, you know what? I wasn't very honest about things, and honestly, what concerned me more than anything was what people thought about me. And so because that concerned me more than anything, I made some compromises I shouldn't have made, and I admit it. So to make peace with your past, you have to admit your piece of the past. And that takes a lot of energy, and it takes emotion, and it takes courage. And part of the reason we avoid telling the story and admitting anything to God is because we're embarrassed, we're ashamed, we want to hide from it. The incredible thing is this. Let me tell you the rest of the story with Adam and Eve. You've read it before, you know it. Adam and Eve tried to cover their shame with those fig leaves. And they would shrivel, shrink, dry up, whatever, and they'd have to make new ones. So God steps in, already had a plan in mind how to solve the problem way in the future with his son Jesus, but in the immediate, God took the life of an animal, and he made more permanent coverings for their nakedness. They couldn't fix their shame problem, but God could. And this morning, when you come to the altar, if you got a shame problem, if there's an admission problem, God's here to meet with you and just talk to you about those things. But you have to admit your responsibility and your part in this sphere of blame that you've been carrying with you in your life. And next week, we're going to talk about how do we change the way we think so that we don't enter into the same pattern over and over again. Let's pray.